Hello class, my name is Bartholomew. I am doing my project on New Zealand, and I'm going to show you the roadmap from where they are and where they are going and what some of the challenges are along the way. And we're also going to look at a complete energy analysis of this country. So let's start here. So the comprehensive analysis energy network of this country, New Zealand, is very diverse. They're one of the best energy producers in the world, and by 2050 they're trying to have a complete net zero emissions, so no greenhouse gases. The electricity currently is 80% from renewables, and the coal that they are using is mostly for export, industrial users, local industry markets, but it's not being used a lot in the North Island. Most of it's coming from the Southern Island. Then there are 3 hydrogen electric power stations that I found, in particular, that I studied, but they do come in many different places in New Zealand. It's one of their main energy sources. They have hydrogen power in Westport, Queenstown, Invercargill, Christchurch, and Taranaki. And Taranaki has 3 different stations, one in Plymouth, one in Normanby, and one in Matukawa. These respectfully is, one is powered output is 20.9 gigawatt hours, built in 1931. And the Normanby one is 4.3 gigawatts per hour per year, commissioned in 1903. And the Matukawa annual output was 22 gigawatt hours, commissioned in 1927, and was just recently upgraded. Now we'll go into wind power. And see the wind power, we have several different stations as well, with one of the biggest wind power farms being in Taranaki. The Waipipi wind farm is 4.3 megawatts for each windmill. This whole farm is 133 megawatts altogether. And it hasn't been completely grid connected yet, but by 2021 is when they plan on having this done. And currently it covers 700 acres. All right. And then there is another place where they're using windmill as well in Palmerston. It's very popular. They have 119 megawatt power average there, and that's been, the construction of that started in 2003. Okay, the solar thermal powers there wasn't much of them in New Zealand. I think it has to do with the temperature not really being all that hot there. But there was some solar voltaics being done in Wangari and Tauranga and Auckland. Auckland has the largest solar array on a pond, and it's over 270 panels, which could power up to 200 homes. And then Palmerton North is another big solar array that can power up to 100 kilowatts. But the country's biggest solar farm is in Marsden Point, and that supplies 26.7 megawatts. All right, and then we'll go into our ocean energy. Right now, I did some research on the ocean energy, but I didn't find, the articles were saying that it's not cost effective to use it because other renewable energies are cheaper. But they do have some potential for ocean energy on the south side and the east shore. All right, so I will go into geothermal power stations, and there are quite a few geothermal power stations. One's in Wagria, it's in Tauranga, Kauria, and Westport, with the biggest one being in Tapu, which is right next to a volcano, the Ring of Fire. After careful consideration, it was found out that the geothermal produced in New Zealand is on the North Island and comes mostly from Tapu. This plant is expected to produce about 700 gigawatt hours, which is over 70% of the power coming from geothermal. These wells can exceed to a depth of more than 300 meters. In addition to 21 Sentinel and Monitor wells were drilled to a depth of approximately 1,500 meters. This geothermal power is supposed to be enough to power 80,000 households. All right, now we'll go into biomass. One of the big biomass farms in New Zealand is 1.8 million acres. The biomass farm they have is 1.8 million acres planted forest. And they say that this could supply 60% of the transport fuels by 2040. And that it's advantageous to have these kind of forest biomass systems in place because they're good for the ecosystem as well. We're growing and we're cleaning up debris and we're keeping the forest rich. These fuels can then be processed into biofuels, which would be produced perhaps by hydrogen production or included by methane, and different options for methane cracking. Biofuels, there's several different methods they're using right now for doing biofuels. But the one big one that stands out is that they're getting the biofuel from biomass, or they're getting it from organic matter and breaking it with methane cracking or something like this. All right, so now let's go on to our role for energy storage. And our energy storage is going to be pumped. One of the biggest ones that stuck out to me was the pumped hydro, which is supposed to be a $4 billion project cost on Lake Onslow. And what they're doing is they want to have pumped hydro is supposed to be 100% renewable energy. So they want to have this for maybe if there was a year of drought, so they could have some resiliency if they had no hydro, since they rely so much on hydro. They could have this stored hydro in case of times of drought. And that was kind of the point of having the pumped hydro. It was a really good storage energy. There also are some cases of compressed air. And these compressed air, one is in Auckland, but it isn't actually above the ground. Usually the compressed airs are below the ground, but in this case it's in a tank above the ground. And it's in Auckland, but it doesn't, what it's basically there for is a resilience system to back up a small emergency amount of energy. It's really not a lot to do much more than a small emergency. But they do have a couple of these placed in Auckland. And then let's go into the batteries. If you look at the batteries, they're doing a new investment this year with the Tesla Power Pack. It just started in January, and it's projected to be 1 megawatt to 2 megawatt hour power packs. And this is going to be from a pumped hydro facility in Auckland. So what they would do is they'd be using the excess hydrogen power to power these batteries in order to store energy. And the projected cost for this project is supposed to be $2 million. Now for fuel cells, on the southern island for tourism, there is a lot of potential for big buses, tourism, for transporting all sorts of people. A very populated area where they're trying to adapt to a fleet of all hydrogen vehicles, especially for tourism. And this is going to happen in the southern island. All right, and then the availability of energy is surplus in New Zealand. It's everywhere. Some of the new projects they have going on is Taraki Pipeline Hydrogen Storage. It's going to be a primary spot for setting up a blended gas system. And that's going to be for hydrogen storage. And then they're also doing in Auckland, they have the Honda electric motor that can produce 120 kilowatts. And it's capable of 605 kilometers traveled, refueling under 6 minutes. This car is going to be very useful once the prices for PEM devices come down. We have that to look forward to. And then, see this battery, Yeah, so the some other of the projects is the Tauropaki Trust Geothermal, which is going to create hydrogen from excess geothermal. And let's see, they also have an export in the North Island where they have an agreement with South Korea. Here we're going to get into the resiliency of this system. And the resiliency blackouts they used to have with earthquakes in Christchurch. Christchurch and Auckland are the two main grid connected cities of New Zealand, with Auckland being kind of doesn't have any energy itself. It gets it from the outside sources, but it can connect the rest of the country together. And this has been very good for like preventing blackouts by having Auckland that kind of act as the smart grid. Outside energy sources are ensuring that the smart grid has energy to run. All right, then some of the natural disasters for this area in New Zealand. One I found was a volcano that erupted in 2006, which just destroyed this crater. You can see the picture there in the bottom left for that one. And then they also had some tsunamis, which is messing up the power grid. You can see that picture on the right with that big wave smashing over all those power lines and the light poles and everything. And then the picture in the top right there you can see it was from an earthquake. And they had several earthquakes there. One was in 2011 was the last big earthquake they had, and that was in Christchurch, which really didn't affect too much of their electric grid, but it did cost them quite a bit of money. All right. So let's see. Then you have those. They had some big bushfires as well, and that was pretty bad this year. And then of course we have the COVID-19 that's also affecting them right now. But now we're going to get into the MEMS devices. So we have, this is kind of an overview on some of the MEMS. We have flow sensors, voltage sensors, current, pressure actuators. These are all ran by fuel cells. So that most MEMS and NEMS are run by fuel cells, and these ones that I found in the paper were also ran by that. As you can see, the pressure sensor picture on the bottom right is a dielectric layer with an anode and a cathode, and when this pressure differential applies, it's going to create a capacitance difference, and that's what's going to correlate us to this pressure. Each the temperature, the different like the flow sensor and everything, the equations were worked out, and it basically comes down to a resistance and ambient temperature coefficient for figuring out the temperature of the system. And then as we can go further into the Internet of Things, right now they're trying to connect a SCADA system that's going to be globally, maybe connecting the whole country together, and that's going to be starting in the capital of New Zealand, which is Taranaki. If they get this plan moving forward as they want to, they'll be unionizing the whole country to be on the same energy grid. So that'd be good. And then to conclude this, we'll talk a little bit more about how the MEMS are going to be working in embedded systems. The embedded systems sometimes we have our MEMS right inside of a cathode or right inside of a tire wheel, and these small sensors are able to monitor things without messing up the flow of the natural environment. They also cover a lot more surface area than they used to, so we're able to monitor things at a much more precise level. And then some different kind of actuator sensors, if you're interested in maybe a micro relay for a VLSI, or an optical phase shifter, or maybe a next generation display, or a micro grippers for robotic surgery, or a focus mechanical for cameras. There's several different applications. It really goes on forever. But with that, I believe I am coming up on 15 minutes for this presentation. And if there are, I do not believe there will be any questions. That is the end of my slide. So thank you for staying by and watching my presentation. Have a good day. Bye.